Good afternoon, students. Welcome back. Currently, we are discussing a very important topic, which was warehousing. As always, before we proceed any further, we will do a very quick recap on all the areas of warehousing that we have discussed so far. One thing that we discussed was the types of warehouses and the benefits of warehouses. When we said types, we discussed about public warehouse, private and contracted. We are not going to discuss any further. We already had a detailed discussion as to what a public warehouse, a private and a contracted warehouse. We also discussed the comparative analysis, the advantages, the disadvantages, the strengths and weaknesses as far all these warehouses are concerned. Private warehouses are owned by a company, it is a proprietorship warehouse. Public warehouses are generally owned by a third party, meant for certain commodities like grains. It could be a bonded warehouse. Items like a cold storage may be a public warehouse. A contracted warehouse again was, if you remember, is a combination of public and private, in the sense that it is still owned by a third party, but it is contracted by a particular company over a period of time, and it enjoys certain benefits during that period of contract. We discussed certain cost effects, the effects of different cost on all these warehouses. We also discussed the benefits broadly. If you remember, we discussed broadly the two benefits of warehouses. One was the economic benefit and the other one was service benefit. Under economic benefit, we have discussed consolidation, break bulk, postponement, and stockpiling. So, these are the four benefits under economic benefits of a warehouse, and we did discuss last time individually what was consolidation warehouse, what is a break bulk warehouse, what is meant by postponement in a warehouse, when a shipment is kept ready but not delivered, not processed, not labeled and delivered later on. We also discussed stockpiling. Under service benefits, we discussed spot stock, assortment, mixing, production support, and marketing support. So, the types of warehouses and the benefits that a customer derives out of a warehouse. What would happen if a warehouse did not exist? What are the kind of economic benefits that a warehouse provides? What are the kind of service benefits a particular warehouse provides? We are going to go further and see what are the different areas of consideration in warehouse management. Just give me a moment, we are going to the particular slide. We also discussed about the warehouse documents. If you can go to the slide for once. We discussed about the warehouse receipts, if you remember, and do keep in mind these are the standard and most commonly used warehouse documents. There are several kinds of warehouses, there are several warehouses used by various companies in different industries. Some industries, in manufacturing industries, in cement industries, in iron and steel industry, pharma industry, food industry, warehouses being used by different logistic service provider for their own, for providing their logistic services. So, no two warehouses would probably have common documentation process, but documents used in warehouses are extremely important, and it needs a thorough and detailed study of the kind of documents that are used in warehouses. We probably can conduct a separate session only on documents being used in our warehouses, because you have to understand the activity in a warehouse is extremely critical. The kind of shipment that are stored in warehouses are of high value. The movement within a warehouse are quite frequent, quite sensitive, time sensitive. So, recording all information about shipment moving through a warehouse, shipments coming in and going out of a warehouse. Sometimes the shipments are stored, sometimes shipment move out of the warehouse without being stored. But whatever the activities may be, there are different activities in terms of the movement of the product, the storage of the product. So, there are different documents, receipts, delivery order, bill of lading. Sometimes shipments are received in a damaged condition, sometimes shipment are received short, sometimes shipment are received in excess of what is mentioned in the inventory. So, all these exceptions needs to be recorded, not only the status of the product, but also the movement history of the product. When did the shipment arrive? Who sent the shipment? When was it sent? Which date it was sent? Where was it kept in the warehouse? What is the location of its what is the storage location of that particular product? When did the shipment move out? On what basis the shipment moved out? What are the purchase orders? What are the delivery orders? So, there are numerous activities and there are documents against each of these activities that needs to be maintained in every warehouse. So, warehouse documentation forms an extremely a critical part in the entire warehouse management process. We did discuss about barcodes. We are not going to discuss any further, because the concept of barcode today is very common. Barcodes are an optical machine readable representation of data. So, there are horizontal bars which represent, each of the bars represent a certain data about that product, and the data, the information are picked up through a scanner and stored in the system. So, at every stage of the shipment, a shipment is scanned, and thus the record of the movement of the shipment is recorded in the system, and it makes it becomes very easy today with the kind of, with the frequency and the volume of shipment being moved every time. It is not possible to maintain a manual, to maintain records manually, because there can be errors. So, this automated method of recording the movement of shipment by barcodes is extremely popular today, is extremely common today. You go to a warehouse, you go to a retail shop, you go to a distributor, you go to a plant, and you would see barcodes being used to maintain or to record the movement of the product in the system. We also discussed about the warehouse operating principle. Now, in order to operate a warehouse with utmost efficiency, there are three factors which needs to be considered or which needs focus. One is So, we are talking of warehouse operating principle. The three areas which are critical for warehouse operation is the design of the warehouse, the handling technology, and third, the storage plan. These three constitute the warehouse operation principle of every warehouse. Under design, if you can just have a look at the slide, we are primarily talking of the number of stories or floors, the height, and the product flow. And we did discuss in the previous session that traditionally a single story warehouse or a warehouse with a single floor were considered to be the best warehouses, because such warehouses do not require the materials to be moved from one floor to the other. But system has changed. Today we have warehouses with multiple floors without any ceiling or any floor in between, so that, and we also discussed that the average height of a floor was 20 to 30 feet. Today there are warehouses which are 4 to 5 stories. So, we are actually speaking of warehouses of 80 to 100 feet as well, and such warehouses are operated through very modern material handling equipments, automated machines, automated picking machines, automated storing machines. So, in a warehouse, the height utilization is extremely important, because in a warehouse, generally a warehouse, the cost of a warehouse is determined through its length, breadth and height, that is 3-dimensional. We are not only talking of the floor. So, it is extremely essential not to effectively use only the carpet area or the floor area, but also the height. Also, what is important is a smooth and a continuous flow of shipment within the warehouse, without any breakages, without any stoppages, without any delay. Let us go to the slide and see what is this all about. We of course discussed this in the previous session, that our ideal warehouse has to be a single story. That is exactly what we said. One floor. Now the elevators are used. Elevators are considered to be a bottleneck earlier. Height utilization, just refer to few of the important words that I have just mentioned over here. The height, most warehouses have 20 to 30 feet ceiling. So, modern and automated high rise facility go up to about 100 feet. When we talk of product flow, again I repeat, just refer to few of the important words over here. Straight product flow, product should be received at one end and shipped at the other end. Straight line product flow. So, that means when we say product flow, that means shipment received at one end of the warehouse and dispatch on the other end without any circular movement. A straight movement minimizes cost, minimizes effort, ensures efficiency. So, this is the product flow is one key element for as far as the design of a particular warehouse is concerned. Let us go to the handling technology. Let us refer to the slide. Let us go to the slide. Efficiency of material handling. Under handling, we are primarily referring to two areas. One is the continuity of the movement and the scale of economies. That means optimizing the usage of the material handling equipments. When I say movement continuity, if you see the next slide, to summarize the next slide about the continuity, we are talking of movement of a particular shipment within the warehouse without utilizing multiple material handling machines or multiple laborers or multiple individuals who are handling a particular shipment. So, we should reduce number of individuals handling a particular shipment, and we should reduce the number of material handling equipments used for one particular shipment. That would ensure the continuity, a smooth continuity of the product through the warehouse, and that is exactly what has been said in this particular slide. What is meant by scale of economies? We all know what scale of economies is optimization. That means all warehouses activity should handle or move the largest quantities possible. Warehouses activity should be designed to move groups of cases. And what are cases? It could be pallets, it could be containers. So, grouping of batches. So, of course, there is a challenge when we have to move. In order to ensure movement scale economies, if I have to move batches, I have to identify different shipment which can be moved in a batch, in a group. So, identification of different orders to make one batch is a challenge, of course, but it would ensure that you are utilizing your movement equipments or the movement resources to the optimum possible. So, that is what is meant by movement scale economies. If you remember, in production, we said what is economies of scale. Generally, what we mean by economies of scale, that a particular plant, it has certain fixed costs and it will have the fixed costs. The fixed costs will remain, will exist irrespective of the volume that the plant produces. So, what is the cost per unit? Cost per production cost per unit is the total cost, total fixed cost divided by the number of units that the plant produce. So, higher the number of units the plant produce, because it already has a fixed cost, then the fixed cost is fixed, is constant. The higher the volume, the higher the production volume, the lower is the cost per unit. The same logic applies in warehouse in movement of shipment. So, the larger the shipment we move in a particular batch, in a particular movement, the larger the shipment one particular machine moves ensures a movement scale economies. The way we have production, similarly we also have scale economies for movement as well. So, we have now covered, as far as the operating principles are concerned, we have covered design and we have covered the handling factor, the handling of shipment within the warehouse. Next we go to the storage plan. Please refer to the slide. While discussing storage plan, as always, again I will draw your attention to the few key areas, like how storage plan is a part of the warehouse operating principle. So, according to third principle, warehouse should consider product characteristics, particularly those pertaining to volume, weight, Product volume is a major concern. High volume sales. Now, I have to understand there are different types of product that are stored in a warehouse. There are commodities which has a high demand, which moves out of the warehouse very frequently, where the movement of the shipments are very frequent. I need to ensure that these products are easily accessible. So, my storage plan should be designed in such a way, or my warehouse design should be in such a way that such items are kept within reach. So, we do not utilize too much of effort, too much of labor, too many machines, too many equipments to pick those shipments from the warehouse. On the flip side, there are items which are not required very frequently. They are required once in a while. It makes sense to have these stored at remote locations at a higher level, because we do not need those shipments every now and then. So, it is the storage plan which has a direct impact on how a warehouse should operate. The next slide will show you a sample storage area. Now, as always, this is just a sample storage area. As we had mentioned in the documentation part, this necessarily need not be a storage area for all companies, whether it is a manufacturing company or a logistics service provider. It is just a sample which shows the area where items are stored, the aisle where the shipment moves, where shipments are received, location where shipments are dispatched. So, it is basically a sample storage area. Let us refer to the next slide on storage plan once again. The plan should include a specific strategy for product dependent, heavy items, bulky items, smaller item. So, the storage plan in a warehouse also depends upon the size of shipments. If a shipment is heavy, if shipments are bulky, they can always be stacked or kept on pallets at a ground level, so that the movement does not involve much expenditure, much of an effort. Whereas, smaller items may require storage shelves or drawers. They need not be kept in the open, they can be kept on the shelves. So, there will be a few videos or some practical some storage areas that will be shown to you, which will give you a practical knowledge as to how a storage or how a warehouse operates, how different items are moved within a warehouse, how different items are stored within a warehouse. So, now you see that the operating principle or the operating how a warehouse should operate depends upon the design of the warehouse, its height, the handling procedure, the handling technology, and the storage plan within the warehouse. Let us go to the next sector. We have already discussed a contracted, a private warehouse. Now, how you plan the distribution warehouse? We can go to the slide and see what is meant by. The initial decision of warehousing are related to planning. A master plan of the layout, space requirement and material handling design should be developed. These decisions establish the character of the warehouse. So, one of the most important, we just go back. So, how do we plan? Now, the decision is taking that a company takes a decision to build a warehouse for its operation. The company may be a logistics service provider, or the company may be a manufacturing company who needs warehouse for its finished goods. The company may be producing components. So, the company can be any company in terms of a manufacturing or a service provider. But when he decides to have a warehouse, or he decides to build a warehouse, or he decides to hire a warehouse, what are the areas that he needs to consider? What are the steps that he goes through before he finally decides upon building a warehouse or establishing a warehouse? And one of the most important part is, we will go to the slide and see, is called site selection. Now, if you see, for any construction, any property, whether it is a personal property, whether it is an industrial property, whether it is a warehouse or a plant, selection of the site, selection as to where my warehouse would be established, be built, that selection depends upon a number of factors. Let us go to the slide and see what are these factors that determines. Location analysis techniques are available. Once it is analyzed, 3 areas in a community may be considered. So, 3 areas, one is a commercial area. So, a site can be selected in an area which is a commercial zone. The area may be served, it may be an outlying area, may be away from, but only served by motor trucks only. So, it is accessible only by vehicles or trucks. Third, it can be a downtown area, it can be away from the city. So, these are the 3 separate zones or areas that may be considered while doing a site selection. 2 most important factors, or 2 most important factors are considered while doing a site selection. One is cost and service availability. To establish a warehouse, to build, suppose a company decides to construct a private warehouse, it requires a lot of initial investment. So, cost optimization, or to have a warehouse at the minimum cost possible, is an important criteria. Also, depending upon what is the need of the warehouse, what are the different kind, what are the products that would be stored in the warehouse, what is the function of the warehouse. In order to fulfill the function of the warehouse, in order to meet the needs of the warehouses, are services available in that particular site? Are relevant services available in that particular site? Services could be any. There could be transportation services, there could be labors, there could be technology requirement. So, depending upon what I need, what my warehouse would do for me, what are the functions that I expect my warehouse to perform, I should ensure that the site I select should have all these services available. Let us go to the next slide. A warehouse always need not to be located in a major industrial area, and we can see that happening. There are several warehouses, lot of e-commerce companies, they are procuring or they are establishing warehouses away from the city, which is not necessarily an industrial zone or industrial area. The reason they do it is because the land or the area is available at a very economical rate. They can avail of a large area at a much economical rate than what they would get in a very popular industrial area. And in today's modern world, areas adjoining a particular city is well connected with transportation and other infrastructure, transportation, roadways, railways, whatever it may be. Let us go back to the slide and see what else is required. In many cities, one observes warehouse among industrial plants and areas zoned for light or heavy industry. This is not a legal necessity because most warehouse can operate under the restrictions placed on a commercial property. So, apart from procurement cost, setting up the warehouse, procurement cost, as I said, is one major factor that needs to be considered, because more often than none, to procure a warehouse or to procure a land for a warehouse requires significant amount of expenditure, but that is not all. To set up the warehouse, to operate the warehouse, so operating expenditure, utility expenses, tax, insurance, highways, highway access, these expenses vary between sites. So, different sites has different expenditure or cost. We have given an example of a food distribution firm. It rejected a site because of a high insurance rate, because the site was located near the end of a water main. So, the company was apprehensive that considering the site being adjacent to a water main may cause damage, and it is a warehouse meant for food products. So, it may cause damage, his products may get spoiled. So, that would have made him insure his goods at a very high premium. The insurance premium would have been very high. So, only that factor made him reject the warehouse. So, if you see, it is not only the procurement cost, it is not only the setup cost, it is the insurance, taxes and tariffs and etc. also. So, when a company, enterprise, firm, they decide to set up a warehouse, they have to consider all these factors before they decide a particular, or they finalize a particular site for their warehouse. So, site selection is extremely important. What are the other factors in site selection? What are the infrastructure available? If a particular warehouse needs constant water supply or high usage of electricity, does that particular site or that particular location has all these benefits, all these resources? Just see the slide, let us see the slide. What is the next part of the site selection says? Adequate water supply available to handle operation. So, it is not only water supply which is mentioned in this particular site, as I said. It may be requirement of electricity, as I said. Cold storages require high quantity of electricity to maintain the temperature, because warehouses are temperature controlled. Cold storages store food items, pharma items, medicines, pharmaceutical items, items which are perishable. So, they need constant supply of electricity, high consumption of electricity. So, a cold storage, it is also a warehouse, cannot be located anywhere. It has to consider whether that particular location, that site has generous amount of electricity available 24 hours. Let us go to the next slide, slide selection. So, basically, if you see the next slide, there are many other factors which has been given over here. Expansion, enough room for expansion. If tomorrow the warehouse needs to expand, to enlarge, it should have that flexible, that the area should be flexible enough to for expansion. The soil, very important. So, now you see, we see so many warehouses, logistics parks all around the country. They all are established after a very, very thorough study of the site where this particular plant or the facility has been established. There are warehouses which stores heavy equipments, heavy machineries. They have to also consider, is the soil good enough, firm enough, strong enough, because in case of any natural calamity, in case of an earthquake, will that be able to sustain the weight? Should the warehouse fall? Should the warehouse get damaged? Should the soil be strong enough to hold the structure of the warehouse? So, now you see so many factors are involved in doing a site selection for a particular warehouse. Let us go to the next slide, where we are talking of the warehouse layout. Again, please refer to few of the important words: handling system, floor plan, product flow, specific needs, pallet utilization, a pallet of non-standard size, specialized product. So, after site selection, we are talking of the layout. When we talk of layout, we are generally talking of the design of the floor or the floor design. Now, a warehouse, the design, the layout of a warehouse is different from a residential warehouse. Our warehouse design primarily considers the movement of the goods, the flow of the product within the warehouse, the kind of pallets or the containers being used within the warehouse, the kind of material handling machines being used in the warehouse, the different types of the size of the products being used in the warehouse. Based on that, the internal layout of the warehouse is designed. So, site selection, one step. Then once you have selected the site, you can also refer, though it is not similar, when we build our own house, own property, we first select a site, right, where I would have my residence, where I should build my apartment or my house or bungalow or villa. Then I do a layout, right, through a designer, through an architect. We design the interiors of the house, the floor design. Similarly, a warehouse also does a interior design of the warehouse, the floor, and primarily what he considers is movement of the product within the warehouse. The rest we will continue in the other side of the break. We will discuss more about what are the other factors that needs to be considered when we construct or before we decide to construct or build a warehouse. Thank you for the time being.